With the internet taking over, cable is slowly starting to become less and less popular. Most people don't like sitting through minutes of commercials at a time, but what if these commercials started talking to you? I will also be starting and closing off tonight's video with some creature stories, both containing some mystery that I'd be curious to see what you guys have to say about. A huge thank you to the writers for allowing me to make this video possible. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, a like and a comment is always appreciated. Subscribing if you're new is as well. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. Since I was little, I loved the forests, and have always been fascinated with everything about it and everything that lived within it. However, it wasn't until recently that I've become absolutely terrified of the forest. More of the things it conceals, and my main reason for posting is to get this off my chest to people who will listen and won't tell me I'm crazy. The plain and simple fact is, I'm scared. I'm absolutely horrified by what I've been seeing. And I have no one to tell who will believe me, and no idea what to do. I don't know what this thing is, but I've seen it several times throughout my life, and every time I see it, it seems like it gets closer to me. And I know it's the same thing I keep seeing, because it's so distinct, and it's not something anyone could easily forget. The thing I'm referring to takes the form of a dog, wolf, or coyote of some kind. Only this creature is distorted in a way that I can't explain as something natural. Let me start with describing its body. Its body from a distance looks like a dog's body, but skinny and elongated, and it has human-like characteristics. The limbs that sprout from its trunk are dog-like, but they're long and skinny. Too long and skinny to look like a normal dog, a half-starved dog, or anything natural to begin with. Its limbs were at least twice the length of a German Shepherd's, and he's even considered tall for a dog. It has no tail, and the fur was thin, patchy, and matted to the bony body of the creature. Then there's the face. Its face is something that haunts me and makes my stomach turn. It has a thin, short, dog-like snout, with a human-like shape, and tiny eyes that appear sunken into its head, and also human-like in a way. The first time I saw this creature was during my childhood. I was maybe 9 or 10, while out on a hike with my grandparents. We were deep in a national park when I noticed something moving from the corner of my eye. I was excited to be out in the forest, and in my excitement, I ran a little ways ahead of my grandparents. So far ahead that I couldn't hear or see them behind me. I did know from my grandpa that if you saw an animal, that you should respect its space and leave it be. So I tried to do just that. The only thing was, something didn't feel right, and I felt this overwhelming sense of unease the moment I saw it. I wasn't close enough to see specific details, but I remember noticing it was smaller than a normal wolf or a coyote, and it walked with this limp, and it looked like it was on 2 legs. I could be mistaken, but that's what it looked like. The second time I saw it, I wasn't alone, and I actually have people to back me up on this. My friends and I were out for a drive one night, and I was 20 at the time. It was late out and we were driving around in the middle of nowhere. Where we're from is heavily forested, and of course, it's pretty dark. We were driving down a stretch of road at about 11:30 or midnight, listening to music, and talking about how horrible work was that night. Everything was fine, until I realized that we were lost, and we were in an area with little to no cell phone service. I didn't want to keep driving, and continue to get lost, so I pulled over onto the side of the road while we tried to figure out where we were, and how to get back home. While we were focused on that, my friend in the front seat said he thought he saw something in the trees behind us, and I told him to shut up, and to stop trying to scare us. But the thing was, he was serious, and I could tell he was starting to get scared. That's when I put down my phone, and looked up trying to see if I could see something too, and honestly I wish I hadn't. Because what came out of the woods seconds after, I started to scan my surroundings, scared me half to death. This dog-like creature stepped out from the trees, and into the light of the headlights, on these 2 long thin legs, its head hanging, and fur patchy and rotted looking. The eyes on this thing looked cold and dead, like it was distorted walking roadkill. All three of us were horrified and I froze in panic, and my friends were screaming for me to drive, as it stared at us with those dead human-like eyes. When I drove off, we watched it disappear into the darkness behind the car, and I haven't been down that country road since. The third time was earlier today, actually. It was in the early evening, and I had just gotten home from work. My house is positioned at the edge of a campground, so there's no shortage of trees, and there's always a woodland visitor or two, taking a stroll through my yard or a neighbor's yard. I usually expect to see a deer or a fox passing by, but I didn't expect to see this creature again, and especially not so close to home. I was walking up to my front door, and something moving caught my eye. I always get excited to see an animal, but what I saw made my blood run cold. Crouching under the cover of trees was the creature I'd seen twice before. It still looked sick and skinny. Its fur was patchy and matted. It had a familiar, distorted-looking face that looked more human than dog in the light, and its eyes were watching me. It stayed a good 100 feet from where I stood, and I couldn't get inside fast enough. I have no idea what this thing is, and I'm terrified. It gets closer every time I see it, and I don't know what it's capable of. I haven't watched cable television since I was a kid. Those commercials that seem to run on forever turned into 30-second ads on the internet. What used to be an obstacle that kept me from my Saturday morning cartoons became something I could just click away. Yesterday I came to visit my parents, and I was reminded of the droning commercials selling half-baked products. My parents were both retired, so they went to bed early and stayed in the bed as long as they could. They'd done their fair share of working. So while I did agree to hang around their house and fix some things up, I thought I'd be spending more time with them. I found myself alone more often than not, though. As my list of repairs whittled down, I came across a request to fix the TV. One of those bulky old sets that were a TV and a cabinet all in one. It was large and dusty, but as far as I could tell, the television was working just fine. The picture was grainy, and the colors were diluted, but that was par for the course on the older models. Just to entertain the notion, I reached back and pulled all the cords out, and gave them a quick wipe, and then I proceeded to clean the rest of it. I turned the television back on and stepped back from it too. I thought maybe the issues was something that would only occur every so often. Like the channel would randomly change or the picture would cut out. Something along those lines. Like I said, I haven't watched cable television in a long time, so I wasn't familiar with the program that was playing, though it looked like something local. A preacher was going on and on about how our sins will be carried through generations. That was until the picture cut out. I was just about to reach for the TV controller when the picture came back. There was a family sitting around the dining table, with what looked like a Thanksgiving feast in front of them. They were having a conversation. I don't remember what about. I wasn't really paying attention. The mom asked for the gravy, and with a smile, a young boy lifted a bowl with a red label printed on the side. "Dan's gravy," it said, and the bowl hung in the frame for a moment. A plume of steam still pouring from the top. Then the screen faded to black, and only the logo remains. "So good you'll get the whole family talking," spoke a robust male voice. I wasn't certain, but I could hear a small impact behind the slogan. Like the bowl had dropped and hit against the table. I remember the logo remaining on the screen for an uncomfortably long time, before it finally switched to the next commercial. This one was a car commercial. I could tell right off the bat, by the way a sleek and black SUV managed to have the city streets all to itself. In the front seats of the car sat a man and woman, both dressed very well, like they had just left an event. For when you need to get from point A to point... A male narrator's voice became muffled as the camera zoomed in more on the car, until it became an interior shot. "I just don't understand why you always do this," the man spoke. He said it calmly, but by the way his hand lifted from the wheel, I sensed aggression. The woman just sat still and looked down at her feet, as the man shifted in his seat. "Would you talk to me?" he asserted as the camera panned out, and the logo for the car company appeared on screen. It wasn't one I was familiar with. I was definitely put off. I haven't seen TV ads in a while, sure, but I didn't understand what the tone was. It was funny or insightful. It wasn't getting any information about the products that I was seeing. Once the car commercial ended, I was brought back to the rambling minister. He paced around the room spouting off scripture. He was an overweight man, and I could see sweat starting to form on his face. He stopped speaking and paced over to a water bottle that was resting on a nearby stool. When he picked it up, he spun the bottle until the label faced the camera. Lifting the bottle to his lips, he began drinking the water, and the camera zoomed in. An uncomfortable amount of time passed as he drank from the full bottle until it was empty. He looked stressed as he did this. Once the drink was empty, he pulled the bottle away and gasped. "That's refreshing. Garland water is the cleanest." When he finished, he started to cough up some of the water, and the image once again went black. I lifted the heavy controller up and pressed down on the channel up button, and while the TV acted like it changed channels, the number itself remained the same, channel 91. I continued to fool around with the buttons while another commercial started playing. "What the hell are you doing?" A female voice rang out from the speakers. It felt so loud and direct, like someone was in the room with me, that I instinctively looked up. It was the family from the gravy commercial. They were all in the same position they had been in, except the bowl had dropped and splashed gravy on the mother's hands. They were all looking right at the camera. My arms lowered to my side and my body grew slack. "Stop looking at us." The woman spoke, and the logo for the gravy showed up briefly, disappeared, and came back as the screen faded out to black. Needless to say, I was stunned. I was pretty confused about the whole thing, and I wondered if this was what my mom was referring to. Another commercial started. Two classically dressed men were walking through a clothing store, but all the clothes were hanging from the ceiling by fishing wires. I decided even before the commercial started that I would just buy my folks a new TV. I'd go out and get it while they were sleeping upstairs. Walking forward, my arm outstretched to press the large silver button on the bottom of the TV. I wouldn't touch that if I were you. I looked up once again to see one of the gentlemen had turned their face to the camera, but when I looked at the screen, he turned away. "Boy, there sure are a lot of fancy clothing here." He spoke. This time his voice was much more indirect, and like he was reading off a script. The two men continued to walk and run their hands along the clothing, until one of them stopped abruptly. Pulling his hand away from the clothing, it was revealed that one of the hooks holding up the clothing had punctured his finger. He stood for a moment like he was in shock. The other man leaned in and started whispering into his ear. "Say your lines, Paulie." His voice was a whisper, but the volume of it didn't change. The man with the hook in his hand started to shake, and the screen cut to black before returning to the preacher. He was screwing off the top of another water bottle, and when the camera dipped enough to see the floor, I witnessed at least a dozen empty and discarded water bottles. Sure enough, he lifted the bottle and started to drink, label out. Shifting to another commercial, I saw something I was finally familiar with. It was one of those as seen on TV ads, except this one had as seen on your TV in the bold red logo. The man in the video was holding a mop handle that didn't have an actual mop on it, but he moved it across the floor without a word like he was cleaning something. The white tile that the mop ran across had deep and black grooves scratched into it. "Watch the cleaning power of the Garland mop with your own eyes," he spoke. His words were chopped and said through tightly clenched teeth. I could see his body visibly tensing up. His skin was red, and his hands were littered with blisters that were seeping white, vicious liquid. "You can buy this for the low price." He took the mop handle and lifted it above his head like a broadsword. "Oh, screw you." He screamed and brought the handle down on the stove that was part of the kitchen set, and as he continued to assault the stove, sounds of winding metal coming from the TV speakers, I realized that the kitchen was really familiar, and sure enough, shaking from the impact of his assault was a pot of gravy on the stove. Then the commercial went black. The screen stayed black longer than it had before. I could hear distant mumblings still coming from the television, like a conversation in a neighboring room. The TV was lit up once more, and there was a father standing by his daughter, who was sitting on a swing. They were in a playground, but it was completely empty apart from the two. "Are you going to start swinging?" the dad warmly asked. "No, you have to help me," the girl replied, turning to face the camera as she spoke. The dad stepped behind her, and for the 30 seconds I watched as he pushed her back and forth on the swing, the both of them expressionless and still. She was getting pretty high, and when she swung back, the father put his hands on the chains of the swing and pushed her forward. Only this time, he didn't let go. The girl started to leave the seat of the swing, and with the momentum she surely would have been sent flying, but the screen flickered. It was the beginning of the commercial again. "Aren't you going to start swinging?" The father spoke. This time his words were agitated, and his hand was rubbing his forehead. "No, you have to help me," she replied, turning towards the camera with tears gathering in her eyes. The scene skipped over and over, showing her turning towards the camera repeating the lines, "You have to help me." It did this for another 30 seconds before the commercial finally ended, and started up another commercial. I must have already been sitting there for 5 minutes at the least, and I hadn't seen any show or network plug. Just one commercial after the other. I started to wonder if I was watching some experimental film, but none of the buttons were working, and it felt like 2 of the commercials had tried to talk to me. I looked back to the stairs that led up to my parents' room, and decided I would try to figure out what was going on with the TV. I know it's stupid, but I was just uneasy about the whole thing. At that time, I didn't feel threatened by it, just perplexed. Almost like the TV was reacting to the sense of security I had instilled in myself. The next commercial started to play. An old woman was sitting on a small and round wooden table facing the camera. She had a steaming cup in her hands and a familiar kitchen set behind her. "I'm getting old." She spoke and lifted the cup to her lips. The sipping noise was much louder than the rest of the commercial, so I thought I should look into Garland's life insurance. She leaned towards the camera like she was whispering a secret. "Before something happens." When her sentence ended, the screen switched to a flickering streetlight, with a dark sky behind it. The camera started to pan out, for when you need to get from point A to point B in style. A bold announcer proclaimed as the camera revealed more and more of the scene. A slick and black SUV had its front folded around the thick metal pole. Steam was piling out from the engine, and the car doors were wide open. A well-dressed woman crawled across the pavement as the camera lowered to the ground ahead of her. A hand came in from off-screen and placed a bowl on the ground with the label that read, "Dan's Gravy." She looked up. Blood was streaking down her face, and she was breathing heavily. Her mouth was moving, lips miming "please" repeatedly. The commercial flickered, showing the old woman dropping the coffee cup, spilling a thick brown liquid out before the commercial's end. The next commercial started. It was a commercial with terrible graphics and charts, and an announcer that detailed the terrible housing economy. The camera panned over a block of houses, and immediately after this I reached down and shut the TV off. As soon as I saw the camera stop scrolling and hover in front of my parents' house, my illusion of safety vanished. I quickly made my way to the windows that overlooked the front of the house. Peering out, I couldn't see anything that was out of the ordinary. "They won't leave you alone." A soft and feminine voice rang out from behind me. I turned around to face the family I had seen earlier. The TV had fuzzed to life once more, and they all sat looking at the camera. All the fixing I had seen earlier was replaced with large lumps of brown sludge, and the lights in the kitchen were dimmed. "Hope you like gravy," she said with an almost vengeful smile. The commercial ended, and when the next one started, I was frozen. I stood in the living room, watching myself standing in the living room. "Are you in need of a new TV?" An excited announcer spoke from the TV. My gaze timidly shifted to the lower portion of the TV, where the brand that made the TV put their logo, in fancy silver writing. The word Garland was printed on the matte silver border. "Of course not. Garland is the only TV you need." The announcer continued. I slowly turned my head towards where the camera was, but when I could see the entirety of the living room, it was empty. I quickly shifted glances between the living room and where the camera should have been, in order to be filming me. When I looked at the TV, the image quickly shifted from me to my sleeping parents bundled up in bed, and then back to me. A rush of nervous energy filled me up, and I ran up the stairs heading towards my parents' bedroom. I swung the door open, but there was nothing there. They were just laying in bed, with their glasses of water on the nightstands. I didn't remember them getting water from the kitchen before they went to bed, though. There was a discarded water bottle sitting on the floor by my mom's nightstand, and I had a suspicion on which brand it was. As I walked back downstairs, I heard the TV beginning another commercial. The same robust announcer started to chime in as the scene shifted through all the commercials I had witnessed. Each time the commercial cycled, the people turned their heads more and more to face the camera. "Do you want to pursue a career in acting?" The announcer questioned as I stepped towards the TV. "Do you want to make money?" A scene flashed of the man who was advertising the mop handle. He had bruises all over him, and his arms were twisted out of its sockets. From out of frame, a green brick of cash was thrown at him, sending the bills flying everywhere on impact. "Do you want to make a name for yourself?" The scene changed to show the father who was pushing his daughter on the swing. He was bathed in flashing blue and red lights, as 2 officers escorted him through the playground. The camera zoomed into a paramedic in the background that was zipping up a large black bag. "Do you want to be part of a family?" I saw the family from the Thanksgiving feast, all sitting at the table talking to each other, but they weren't saying anything, just mumbling nonsense as the camera panned over them, until it reached the mother who was gripping a knife in her hand. She started at the camera for a moment, before bringing the knife up to her throat. The scene cut to black. And finally, "Do you want to save your loved ones?" The next scene showed the door to my parents' room opening. The scene skipped as it did for the swinging girl. The door opening over and over again, like an attempt to hypnotize me. "Then give yourself to Garland Acting Agency." I listened to a phone number being read off, one that had far too many digits. The number ingrained itself in my head like a parasite as I watched my parents on TV. This all happened just an hour ago. I'm going up to bed after writing this, and when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to make a nice breakfast for the 3 of us. We'll catch up like I was hoping to do when I drove down here. After that, I'm going to order my mom a new TV, and I'll make sure to destroy that piece of crap they have now. And after that, I have a call to make. I love cats. I really do. However, I don't fit the crazy cat lady stereotype. Rather, I fit the married crazy cat man. My wife Lauren also really loves cats. We both also like dogs, but we don't have too many of them hanging around here. Where was I? Right. I love cats. So much in fact, despite having no cats of our own. I buy dry and wet cat food to feed all the strays that live in our rather fancy neighborhood. It's not just strays that come in. Sometimes cats from neighboring houses will come around. People might ask, why do this? Well, because we feed the strays, not to mention we did TNR. They don't go hunting for birds, which helps prevent even more birds being wiped from this planet. See, a long time ago, before Lauren and I came around, there used to be an actual cat lady who lived a few houses down. She took well care of her cats, and lived with her daughter and son-in-law. She passed away from cancer. Her daughter was going to give the cats away to a loving home, but during the distractions of her mother's passing, all the cats escaped the house. See, they had just moved in with the mother due to the failing health, so they never got around to neutering and spaying the 20 cats in the house. But you never would have realized she had 20 cats. Such a clean house. I went there once before, said Lauren. So when they left the house, they somewhat terrorized the neighborhood, until we showed up. We would leave food out for the cats, would establish trust, and the rest is history. So we have a daily schedule. We leave food out for the strays, and go about our day. When either of us get home, we go get food and then go to the backyard, where we make sure to do a head count and make sure things are alright with the cats. Our usual number is 20, but when it's a day the neighbor's cats are allowed outside, there's 25. Last week, Lauren and I sat on the back porch, listening to the cats purring and munching on their dry food. I got up and walked over to the railing, leaning against it to glance down at the cats. I've learned no pats during dinner. Only after dinner. Out of habit, I looked at each and every cat, silently counting them. 26 in all. Happy, I turned away. 26? Doing a double take, I looked back down. What the heck? 26 cats. There was an extra. The strays, because they were familiar with each other, would always be close together, munching away on their food, while the 5 others would be more separate from each other. My eyes latched onto an unfamiliar cat, having dragged a small bowl away from one of the house cats and was eating by himself. Mika, the one whose bowl was stolen from, sat huddled against his girlfriend, Rika. They were from the same house, and I noticed his fur was bristled, but he was too much of a wuss to even think about fighting back. "What's up?" Lauren asked, watching as I stepped off the porch. I heard her get up from her chair and go to where I had just been standing. I heard her mutter, "Who the hell is that?" Cautiously, I crouched a bit away from the stranger, examining him from afar. He was somewhat heavy, not overweight or something, but like if I picked him up, my arms would get sore if I held him for too long. His fur was similar to that of a tiger, only instead of orange he had cream white fur with black stripes. One eye was green, the other blue. I'd never seen such a cat. There was something about him I couldn't put my finger on, something different and unusual. His eyes seemed to hold some kind of intelligence, something human-like. Could that be it? As if sensing my presence for the first time, the stranger swallowed hard and glanced up, pupils dilated and a low growl, sounding akin to an alligator hissing, escaped from his throat. "Easy, buddy," I murmured, slowly blinking. Keeping a distrustful eye on me, the stranger resumed eating. The way he was gobbling down the food, you'd think he had never been fed in his life, despite his weight suggesting otherwise. When did he get here? Quickly, the stranger polished off the food and began grooming himself. He twisted his body away from me, so I couldn't catch a glimpse of his tongue. However, with his muscles straining, I could see he was rather developed and muscular. It wasn't obvious before, but now it was. I could see some scars on his chest, which had been hidden due to the way he had been sitting while eating. He turned back to me as I sat down on the grass and held my hand out. "Here, kitty kitty," I said, wiggling my fingers. Cautiously, the stranger approached me and sniffed my offering hands, mouth drawn back in a grimace. He gave me a dirty look, but allowed me to stroke his head. It felt like velvet, but rather than warmth, his fur felt cold, like a crisp autumn morning. But when Lauren approached me, he turned and took off running, tail pulled up. "That was rude," Lauren muttered, going around me and picking up Mika's food bowl. She clicked her tongue at the timid cat and shook the bowl. "Come on, baby, I'll get you some food." Letting out a starved meow, Mika followed Lauren to the back porch, and followed her into the house where we kept the cat food near the door. Soon the other cats finished eating, and all began doing their different things. That was probably the only time the stranger would show up, right? Wrong. He showed up the next day, only appearing when I got up to look down at the cats. Once again he had stolen food from Mika, who looked like he was staring at a bear. The stranger didn't even look at me when I approached him again, but stopped eating when I said, "Stop eating Mika's bowl, it's very rude." His eyes narrowed, and he almost looked offended. This time he lingered a little longer, most likely because Lauren was staying overtime. The purr that escaped the stranger's throat sounded like a phone vibrating on a glass counter. I know every cat has different purring, but his sounded so artificial, like someone trying to replicate a purring cat. The next day, Lauren remained on the porch. I had requested she do so I can examine the stranger much better. He was lying on my lap, his purring practically feeling like a massage. He lazily flipped onto his back, and I gently took one of his paws, pressed my finger against the padding of his foot, and watched as his claws slid out. My jaw almost hit the floor. Instead of normal cat claws, they looked like someone had jammed a sharp metal stick into his paws, in the shape of a claw. Yet they looked natural, rather than someone forcing them in there, like he had been born with it. Despite being metal, they looked shiny and new, rather than worn down and rusty. "What the heck are you, little dude?" I asked, squinting. The stranger let out what sounded like someone trying to mimic a cat meowing. "You're super weird. I feel like I should call you Cadenstein's monster." It became part of our norm, even buying an extra bowl for Cadenstein so he would stop stealing from Mika. Lauren and I were even thinking about maybe actually taking Cadenstein in. I was tempted to put a GoPro on Cadenstein to see where he goes, or follow him to wherever he hides out, but Lauren told me no. It would be rude to spy on him. This went on from Sunday night to Friday nights. On Saturday nights, our world was flipped upside down. Lauren is a strong woman, but we'll be attending therapy soon just in case. In the meantime, she's in the hospital. Doing a lot better now, actually. Her wounds weren't that severe. Lauren will be taking over here. Hey, it's Lauren. So you're probably wondering, what the heck is going on? What happened? Are you alright? Yeah, I'm fine. Mentally fine in my opinion. So to begin, I was working overtime again. My job is kind of busy, you know? Austin wasn't home that night, out doing last-minute grocery shopping since he had forgotten to do so. I came home to a dark house, get inside, and go to the back porch. I didn't step outside, just turned on the porch lights and did a quick glance. I noticed Cadenstein was sitting on the porch, so I opened the door to invite him in. He remained silent, looking offended that I dare even offer to be in his presence. I closed the door behind me and went upstairs. I didn't get too far, until someone pushed me down the stairs. I screamed when I tumbled down them. It was painful, I must admit. I heard someone come thundering down the stairs, and just as I looked up to see my attack, they began to assault me. Not sexually, thank God, but just beating the ever-living crap out of me, like I had personally insulted their mother. They kicked me in the stomach several times, grabbing me by the hair and slamming my head into the wall and floor. I fought back, but they would kick me more. I honestly thought I was going to die. At one point, they held a gun up to my forehead, and I kept thinking, this is it. This is where I die. That's when I heard the scariest noise I ever heard. I wouldn't be able to replicate it, nor would I want to. You know how foxes and cougars scream, like a woman? It was like that, only mixed with a noise similar to glass breaking. And through my swelling eyes I saw a large, four-legged animal pull the assailant off of me, dragging him away. I heard gunshots and a man screaming. I'm pretty sure I heard bones breaking too, but I was practically unconscious at that point. I think I had a nightmare, a graphic one. I remember it. Of a giant tiger crouched over a scientist, chomping, eating, and licking his dead body, consuming even the stereotypical white lab coat you see in movies. The room looked like a science classroom gone wrong, blood everywhere and bodies. But the lighting was poor, so I couldn't get a good look at the tiger. Before much could happen, I woke up in the hospital, feeling really out of it and sore. Austin here. When I got home that night, the first thing I smelled was blood. I found Lauren lying at the bottom of the stairs and called the police. I told them what I had found. They did a look around the house as I left to follow Lauren to the hospital. Later they told me someone had been waiting upstairs for one of us to come home, making themselves comfortable in our bedroom, and some jewelry was missing, and some pictures smashed. A burglary gone wrong? Someone wanted to hurt one of us? We'll never know, because there was no body. There was no evidence where the person had gone. In fact, they found no bullet holes in the walls or floor, or anywhere for that matter. When I came back from the hospital, Lauren is still there as we speak. I went to the back porch, exhausted, drained, scared, and upset. A familiar meow caught my attention. I nearly jumped a foot in the air when something cold rubbed against me, but when I looked down, nothing was there.